A luxury boutique, a regular day, but behind the shining jewelry, something shocking is about to unfold. Stay until the end to witness a moment of justice you won't forget. If you believe in fairness and kindness, hit the like button and subscribe for more inspiring stories. The city skyline stretched out before Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as he leaned back in his leather chair, the late afternoon sun casting a warm glow through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office. The buzz of the metropolis far below seemed distant, almost unreal, as Dwayne sorted through a stack of documents on his massive oak desk. Scripts for upcoming films, charity event proposals, and endorsements cluttered the surface, each demanding a slice of his time and attention. Yet today, none of it seemed as important as the slim file David, his trusted assistant, had just placed before him. Dwayne noticed the seriousness on David's usually composed face. It wasn't often that David looked genuinely unsettled. Setting aside the movie script he had been reading, Dwayne reached for the folder, flipping it open with a casual but curious hand. What he found inside quickly erased any casualness from his demeanor. Printed emails, screenshots of social media posts, and pages of customer reviews spilled out in meticulous order. But the contents were anything but orderly. As Dwayne skimmed through them, his jaw tightened. Complaints about his luxury jewelry boutique, Johnson's Jewels, filled the pages. It wasn't just isolated incidents. There was a pattern. Customers, particularly those who were elderly or of Asian descent, reported being mistreated, belittled, and humiliated by staff members. One review struck him like a punch to the gut. "I went to Johnson's Jewels to find a gift for my granddaughter's birthday. The woman at the counter looked me up and down, sneered, and told me if I couldn't afford anything, I should leave. I walked out humiliated. I used to admire The Rock for his respect and kindness, but his store doesn't live up to his name." Dwayne set the paper down, a heavy silence filling the room. His massive hands folded together tightly as he stared at the polished surface of his desk. His whole career had been built on principles of respect, inclusion, and kindness. That his own business could become a place of cruelty and prejudice was a betrayal he couldn't ignore. "Who's responsible for this?" he finally asked, his voice low but steady. David shifted uncomfortably. "There's one name that comes up repeatedly. Amanda. She's a senior sales manager. Been there for over 6 years. According to the reports, she has a reputation for looking down on customers she thinks aren't worthy, especially if they're elderly or look like they can't afford high-end items." Dwayne exhaled sharply through his nose. His mind raced. He had trusted his team to uphold the values he lived by. Clearly, that trust had been misplaced. "I'm not going to sit here and guess," he said, standing up. "I'm going down there. I want to see it with my own eyes." David blinked. "You mean go to the store? Right now?" "Yes," Dwayne confirmed, already reaching for a simple gray hoodie hanging from the back of his chair. "But not as me." Within minutes, Dwayne had transformed his appearance. Gone were the expensive clothes and unmistakable aura of celebrity. Dressed in worn jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie pulled low over his forehead, he slipped on a plain medical mask. The disguise was simple but effective. On the busy streets of the city, he would blend in as just another man going about his business. As he made his way to Johnson's Jewels, Dwayne felt a knot forming in his stomach. He had built the store as a tribute to beauty, to dreams made tangible. Jewelry wasn't just about wealth to him. It was about memory, about milestones, about moments that stayed with a person for life. To think that his dream had twisted into a nightmare for some customers burned within him. He approached the boutique as the sun dipped behind the skyscrapers, casting long shadows across the gleaming sidewalk. The store looked perfect from the outside, expensive, inviting, trustworthy. The golden lettering of Johnson's jewels shimmered in the glass above the doors, but appearances could lie. Dwayne pulled the hood tighter around his face and stepped inside. The boutique was a masterpiece of design. The floors, a shining marble, the showcases, crystal clear and lined with velvet. Classical music floated softly through the air, and well-dressed sales associates glided behind counters, flashing polished smiles at affluent customers browsing the collections. Dwayne moved quietly, pretending to admire a display of emerald earrings. He kept his head down, but his ears open. It didn't take long. Near one of the side counters, two young saleswomen whispered to each other, their laughter sharp as broken glass. "Look at that one said, nodding toward the entrance. Dwayne followed her gaze. A frail, elderly woman, Asian, dressed in a simple coat and clutching a worn leather purse, had just walked into the store. Her eyes were wide, her face lit with the quiet excitement of someone entering a world they rarely saw. "Another one of those," the second saleswoman sneered. "Probably wants to touch everything but won't buy anything. Bet she can't even afford a keychain." The words hit Dwayne like a blow to the chest. His hands curled into fists in the pockets of his hoodie. He forced himself to breathe, to stay calm. He needed to see it all. The elderly woman, oblivious to the cruel whispers, approached the main counter where a tall blonde woman stood. Amanda, he assumed. Her arms were folded, her expression already twisted into a scowl. "Excuse me," the woman said politely, her voice soft. "I'm looking for a gift for my granddaughter. Something special." Amanda's smile was tight and fake. She reached into the display and pulled out a glittering diamond bracelet, placing it on the counter with exaggerated care. "This piece is perfect," Amanda said sweetly. $12,000. The elderly woman gasped quietly, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her purse closer. "Oh, that's more than I expected," she murmured. Amanda's mask of professionalism slipped. "If you can't afford it, maybe you're in the wrong place," she said, loud enough for others nearby to hear. "There's a flea market 2 blocks down. You might find something more suitable." A few customers glanced over. No one intervened. No one said a word. The elderly woman's face turned crimson. Her shoulders hunched and she turned, her steps slow, her head bowed in shame. Dwayne had seen enough. He moved forward with quiet, deliberate steps. As he reached the woman, he gently placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Please, ma'am," he said quietly, "don't leave." She looked up at him, confused. Slowly, Dwayne removed his hood and mask. The store fell into stunned silence. Every head turned. Every whisper ceased. Amanda's eyes widened in horror. The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, standing right there in her store, watching her. Dwayne's voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the steel underneath. "I saw everything," he said, his gaze locked on Amanda, "and we're going to talk." The atmosphere inside Johnson's Jewels thickened to a suffocating silence as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson stood revealed, his imposing figure commanding the attention of every single soul in the boutique. Amanda's face drained of color as she struggled to find words, her mouth opening and closing uselessly. Customers shifted awkwardly, some pulling out their phones to record what they instinctively knew would become a defining moment. Dwayne kept his focus squarely on Amanda, every inch of him radiating controlled intensity. He stepped closer to the counter, his steps slow and deliberate. Amanda instinctively backed up a step, bumping into the polished glass behind her. Dwayne's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Tell me," he said, low and even. "How much is that bracelet really worth?" Amanda's lips quivered. $1,500, she admitted in a barely audible whisper. Dwayne nodded slowly, letting the information sink into the gathered crowd. His gaze never wavered from her. "You told this woman," he said, motioning toward the elderly customer, "that it was $12,000. Why?" Amanda swallowed hard. I thought—" "You thought she couldn't afford it," Dwayne finished for her, his voice still calm but edged with steel. "You looked at her clothes, her age, and her face, and you decided she was beneath you." Amanda had no answer. Her hands trembled visibly now, and her colleagues nearby shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to meet Dwayne's eyes. "You judged her," Dwayne continued, his voice growing stronger, his words deliberate. "You disrespected her. You humiliated her. And you did it in my store, under my name." A murmur spread through the customers. Some nodded, others looked deeply uncomfortable. The truth, once spoken aloud, became undeniable. Dwayne turned to the elderly woman who stood silently by his side, clutching her purse as if it were a shield. He softened his tone. "You did nothing wrong," he said gently. "You deserve to be treated with respect, always." The woman blinked rapidly, clearly overwhelmed by the attention but grateful for his words. Turning back to Amanda, Dwayne delivered the final blow. "You're fired," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Effective immediately. You don't represent what I stand for. You don't represent this store. You don't represent respect." Amanda's face crumpled, and for a moment she looked like she might argue. But one glance around the boutique told her it was useless. No allies, no support, only judgmental stares and whispered condemnation. Tears welled in her eyes, but Dwayne's expression remained impassive. She tore off her employee badge with shaking hands, slammed it onto the counter, and fled toward the back of the store, disappearing behind the staff door with a final slam. For a few seconds, silence reigned. Then a few customers began to clap quietly, a ripple that quickly grew into genuine applause. Dwayne lifted a hand to quiet them. This wasn't about spectacle. This was about setting things right. He turned to the elderly woman once more, offering a kind smile. "I'd be honored if you would allow me to make this right," he said. She shook her head quickly, overwhelmed. No, you don't have to." "I insist," Dwayne said warmly. He walked to the display case, carefully retrieved the bracelet Amanda had tried to withhold, and placed it gently into a velvet box. Turning back to the woman, he held it out to her with both hands. "For your granddaughter," he said simply. Her hands trembled as she accepted the gift. Tears welled up in her eyes. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Dwayne replied. Somewhere in the back, a few employees had gathered, watching the scene unfold. Among them stood a young woman named Sophie, one of the newer sales associates. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears as she witnessed the moment. She had worked under Amanda's tyranny for months, knowing something was wrong but feeling powerless to stop it. Dwayne noticed her gaze and gave her a slight nod, silently acknowledging her presence. As the elderly woman clutched the box to her chest, Dwayne gently asked, "Would you stay for a few more minutes? There's something I need to address." She nodded, smiling through her tears. Dwayne turned to face the rest of the employees, his voice rising so all could hear. "Listen carefully," he said. "What happened today, what was allowed to happen, is unacceptable. This store bears my name, and that name stands for respect, for kindness, and for integrity. From this moment on, things are going to change. The employees stood frozen, unsure whether to feel fear or hope. We will treat every single customer with dignity, no matter who they are, what they look like, or how much money they have, Dwayne continued. No exceptions. Several employees exchanged glances. Some looked relieved, others guilty. Sophie stepped forward hesitantly. "Mr. Johnson," she said, voice shaking slightly, "if I may, Amanda wasn't the only problem. She made it clear that if any of us spoke up against her, she would make sure we regretted it." Dwayne's expression hardened. He had suspected as much. "You're safe now," he said firmly. "I promise you that. Anyone who acts out of line will be dealt with, immediately." Sophie nodded, her shoulders straightening with a newfound confidence. Another employee, an older man named Harold, cleared his throat awkwardly. "I should have said something sooner," he admitted. "I was wrong to stay silent." Dwayne looked at him, seeing not defiance but regret. He gave Harold a single nod of acceptance. "It's never too late to do the right thing," he said. He turned back to the elderly woman. "I want to do more than apologize," Dwayne said. "I want to make sure no one else ever feels unwelcome here again." She smiled gently. "That would be a beautiful thing." Dwayne smiled back, feeling a heavy weight lift slightly from his chest. "Then let's start now," he said. He gestured to the store, inviting everyone, employees and customers alike, to be part of the change. Outside, the sky had deepened into twilight, casting a golden glow across the marble floors. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted. Where once there had been silent complicity and quiet cruelty, now there was the first flicker of hope. Dwayne stood tall in the center of the boutique, knowing that this was only the beginning. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but tonight a foundation had been laid, and he would make sure it stood strong. The silence that had settled over Johnson's Jewels was slowly replaced by a low hum of conversation as customers resumed browsing, though now their movements seemed more cautious, more reflective. Employees stood straighter, their faces tight with a mix of shame, relief, and determination. The elderly woman remained close to Dwayne, still clutching the velvet box as if it were a lifeline. She seemed hesitant, as if unsure whether she truly belonged here after everything that had transpired. Dwayne noticed her unease immediately. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a gentle tone meant only for her. "Would you sit with me for a moment?" he asked, motioning to a small seating area adorned with leather chairs near the center of the boutique. The woman hesitated, then nodded, allowing herself to be guided to one of the chairs. As they sat, Dwayne offered her a warm, reassuring smile. "I want to hear your story," he said simply, "if you're willing to share it with me." The woman hesitated again, looking down at her worn hands resting atop the velvet box. After a long pause, she finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. "My name is Mrs. Lynn," she said. "I came to this country 40 years ago. I worked in a garment factory for most of my life, saving every penny I could." She glanced up at Dwayne, her eyes shining with quiet pride. "My daughter was the light of my life. She worked hard, became a teacher, started a family of her own." Mrs. Lynn paused, her expression growing sad. "She passed away 5 years ago. Cancer. Very sudden. She left behind a little girl, my granddaughter, May." Dwayne listened intently, his heart aching at the pain in her voice. "May was only 8 when her mother died," Mrs. Lynn continued. "Since then, it's just been the two of us. I raise her the best I can, but it's not easy." She swallowed hard. "This bracelet, it looks like the one my daughter used to wear. I wanted May to have it to remember her mother. I saved up for months, skipping lunches, putting away every spare dollar. I thought maybe I could afford something special, something that would make May feel like her mother was still with her." Dwayne's throat tightened as he listened. Around them, the world continued to move, but for him, the focus was solely on Mrs. Lynn and her story. "You did something extraordinary today," Dwayne said quietly. "You showed more strength walking into this place than some people show in their whole lives." Mrs. Lynn shook her head. "I almost believed her," she admitted, voice trembling. "That woman, Amanda. I almost believed I didn't belong here, that I was foolish for even trying." Dwayne leaned forward, his gaze intense but kind. "You belong anywhere you want to be," he said firmly. "Don't ever let anyone make you doubt that." Mrs. Lynn's eyes welled with tears, but she smiled through them. "Thank you," she whispered. At that moment, a soft voice interrupted them. It was Sophie, the new acting sales manager. She approached carefully, a respectful distance between her and Dwayne. "Mr. Johnson," she said, her voice a little steadier than before, "we've gathered the staff. They're ready to listen." Dwayne nodded and rose to his feet, offering a hand to Mrs. Lynn, who accepted it gratefully. Together, they walked back toward the main floor where the employees had assembled into a loose semicircle. Their faces reflected a range of emotions: fear, guilt, hope. Dwayne stood before them, his presence alone commanded silence. "I'm not here to shame anyone," he began, his voice firm but not harsh, "but I am here to make sure that what happened today never happens again." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the group. "Respect isn't a suggestion," he continued. "It's a requirement. It's the bare minimum of what we owe to every person who walks through these doors." He glanced around, meeting the eyes of every single employee. "If you cannot uphold that standard," he said, "you cannot work here." There was no anger in his tone, only certainty. Several employees nodded, some visibly relieved to hear these words spoken aloud. "I know Amanda wasn't acting alone," Dwayne said. "Maybe you laughed at her jokes. Maybe you looked the other way. Maybe you thought it wasn't your problem." He paused. "But silence makes you complicit. Silence tells victims that they're alone." A young man near the back, no older than 25, lowered his head in shame. Dwayne caught the movement and made a mental note to speak with him later. "We are going to change," Dwayne said, "starting today." He outlined the first steps: mandatory retraining on customer respect and inclusivity, an open-door policy for reporting misconduct directly to him or Sophie without fear of retaliation, and a zero-tolerance rule for discrimination of any kind. "You are the face of this store," Dwayne told them. "Every smile, every greeting, every interaction reflects who we are. And if you choose to stay, you're choosing to live those values every single day." A murmur of agreement spread through the group. It wasn't loud, but it was sincere. Dwayne then turned back to Mrs. Lynn. "We owe her an apology," he said simply. One by one, the employees approached her. Some bowed slightly, others offered quiet words of regret. Mrs. Lynn accepted each apology graciously, her dignity untouched by the earlier cruelty she had suffered. As the last employee finished, Dwayne addressed everyone once more. "There's one more thing," he said. "We're not just fixing what's broken, we're building something better." He outlined his idea for a new initiative, a monthly event dedicated to honoring elderly customers and those often overlooked in high-end retail spaces. Complimentary refreshments, Personalized service and small tokens of appreciation would be offered as gestures of genuine respect. The employees responded with cautious but growing enthusiasm. Sophie, in particular, seemed energized by the vision, taking notes rapidly on a small notepad. Mrs. Lynn's smile widened as she listened. "That would be wonderful," she said softly. Dwayne turned back to her, feeling a profound sense of gratitude that she had stayed, that she had trusted him enough to witness this moment. "Will you come to our first event?" he asked. Mrs. Lynn hesitated, then nodded. "I would be honored." A ripple of warmth spread through the boutique, as if the very walls themselves recognized the shift taking place. Dwayne took a deep breath, allowing himself a small smile. For the first time in hours, he felt a genuine sense of hope. Change had begun, and this time it was real. The next morning, the air around Johnson's Jewels felt different. The store opened its doors to the soft glow of the early sun, and the usual sterile luxury had been replaced by an atmosphere of cautious optimism. Dwayne, the Rock, Johnson arrived early, walking through the glass doors with a sense of purpose. Dressed casually but exuding quiet authority, he immediately sensed the tension lingering beneath the surface. Employees busied themselves with straightening displays, polishing cases, and preparing for the day ahead, but their movements were a little sharper, a little more alert. Sophie approached him almost immediately, a clipboard clutched tightly in her hands. She looked nervous but determined. Dwayne offered her a reassuring nod, silently encouraging her to speak. "Mr. Johnson," she began, her voice steady despite the visible tension in her shoulders, "the team has started working on the monthly appreciation event you suggested. We're thinking of calling it Legacy Day, a day to honor and welcome all generations, especially our elders." Dwayne's face broke into a smile. "I like that. Legacy Day. It says exactly what we want it to." Sophie smiled back, relief flickering across her face. She glanced over her shoulder towards the back of the store. "Also, the staff have been coming to me one by one, sharing ideas on how to improve. It's like they were just waiting for permission to care." Dwayne's expression softened. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You gave them that permission, Sophie. Don't underestimate your role in this." Before she could respond, the sound of the front door opening drew both their attention. A woman stepped inside, tall, blonde, dressed not in the sharp suits of yesterday, but in simple jeans and a jacket. Amanda. Her appearance was uncharacteristically subdued. She looked around hesitantly, her face pale, her movements stiff. The store seemed to collectively stiffen. Conversations dropped to whispers. All eyes followed Amanda as she walked awkwardly toward the center of the boutique where Dwayne and Sophie stood. Dwayne's stance remained relaxed, but his eyes sharpened. Sophie instinctively moved closer to him. Amanda stopped a few feet away, wringing her hands. Her voice, when it came, was small and brittle. I wanted to apologize," she said, her gaze darting from Dwayne to the employees behind him. "Not because I expect to be forgiven. I know I made terrible mistakes. I needed to say it." Dwayne regarded her silently, giving her the space to speak. Amanda's voice cracked as she continued. "I thought being a manager meant being untouchable, powerful. I thought if I acted like I was better than everyone, I would be respected. But I was wrong. I hurt people. I hurt the very place I was supposed to protect." Some employees shifted uncomfortably. Others watched with guarded skepticism. Amanda looked directly at Mrs. Lynn, who had returned for another visit, now sitting comfortably near the front with a cup of tea offered by Sophie earlier. "I'm sorry. Amanda said, her voice shaking. "I'm sorry for treating you with anything less than the respect you deserve." Mrs. Lynn gave a small, polite nod, but said nothing. Amanda turned back to Dwayne. "I don't expect to come back. I know I burned that bridge. I had to say it." For a long moment, Dwayne said nothing. He studied Amanda carefully, weighing her words and her posture. Finally, he spoke. "Words are a start," he said quietly. "But change isn't about what you say, it's about what you do after the words." Amanda nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She turned without another word and left the store, her departure quiet and unceremonious. Dwayne turned back to the staff, finding their faces a mixture of emotions: relief, uncertainty, hope. "We move forward," he said simply, not with bitterness, not with revenge, but with a commitment to doing better. He glanced around the boutique, seeing it not just as a store, but as a symbol of what could happen when someone chose kindness over cruelty, action over silence. "Legacy Day is our first step," Dwayne said, raising his voice slightly so all could hear. "But it can't be the only step. Every day has to be Legacy Day. Every customer has to be treated like family." Sophie stepped forward, her voice gaining strength. "We've started putting together a list of small gestures we can do daily, offering a seat to older clients, complimentary refreshments, personalized thank you notes, real, human touches." Dwayne nodded approvingly. "Perfect. Real change isn't in grand gestures. It's in the small, consistent things we do every single day." The employees seemed to stand a little taller, the burden of the past starting to lift from their shoulders. Dwayne turned to Mrs. Lynn, who watched the proceedings with a serene expression. "Mrs. Lynn," he said warmly, "you're our honored guest today. Would you do us the favor of being our first Legacy Day participant?" Mrs. Lynn smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. She rose carefully to her feet and walked toward Dwayne and Sophie. "I would be honored," she said simply. Dwayne turned to the employees. "Today," he said, "we set a new standard." Applause broke out, not loud but genuine. It filled the boutique with a sense of renewal. For the first time since Dwayne had stepped foot into the store the night before, he allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Real change was happening, not just in the policies or the structure of the store, but in the hearts of the people who worked there. The journey wasn't over, but today they had taken the first real step, and Dwayne was determined it wouldn't be the last. The preparations for the first Legacy Day moved quickly, driven by the energy and newfound sense of mission inside Johnson's Jewels. In the days following Amanda's departure, the boutique transformed not just in appearance but in spirit. Where once there had been an undercurrent of silent judgment, now there was an earnest effort to create warmth, to rebuild trust, to truly embody the values Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson had always envisioned for the store. Flyers were printed and distributed around the city, inviting seniors and their families to visit Johnson's Jewels for a special day of appreciation. Word spread quickly, especially among the communities that had long felt unwelcome in such opulent spaces. Sophie and the other employees worked tirelessly, arranging seating areas with comfortable chairs and tables where tea, coffee, and pastries would be served. Small bouquets of fresh flowers adorned the boutique, filling it with a welcoming scent that contrasted sharply with the store's previously sterile luxury. Dwayne himself was deeply involved, reviewing every plan, inspecting every detail, ensuring that the event would be more than a marketing ploy. It had to be real. It had to matter. On the morning of Legacy Day, Dwayne arrived early, carrying several trays of homemade cookies he had baked the night before with the help of his youngest daughter. He smiled as he placed them on the tables, earning surprised grins from the staff. "Nothing says welcome like homemade," he said with a wink, setting a tone of genuine hospitality that no scripted advertisement could replicate. The first guests arrived shortly after the doors opened. Seniors of all backgrounds, some alone, some accompanied by grandchildren or friends, stepped cautiously into the boutique, their eyes widening at the warm, inviting atmosphere. Employees greeted them with smiles that were no longer forced, offering cups of tea and small gifts, personalized keychains with the store's new motto engraved, "Respect is priceless." Mrs. Lynn arrived just before noon, her granddaughter May walking shyly beside her. The little girl, no older than 13, clutched her grandmother's hand tightly. When she spotted Dwayne across the room, her eyes grew wide. "Grandma," she whispered, tugging excitedly, "that's him! That's the Rock!" Mrs. Lynn chuckled softly and led May toward Dwayne, who greeted them both with a warm embrace. "You must be May," he said, crouching slightly to meet the girl's eyes. "Your grandmother's told me all about you. She's very proud." May blushed but managed a shy smile. Dwayne rose and turned to Mrs. Lynn. "Would you do me the honor of being our first official customer today?" he asked. Mrs. Lynn's eyes shone with gratitude as she nodded. Together, they walked to a special display set up near the front, a new collection of affordable, meaningful pieces designed to celebrate life's important moments without an intimidating price tag. "This," Dwayne said, lifting a delicate silver locket, "was made with people like you and your family in mind. It's not about how much it costs, it's about what it means." Mrs. Lynn accepted the locket, her hands trembling slightly. She opened it to find a tiny engraving inside. "Family is forever." Tears filled her eyes as she clasped the locket to her chest. Around them, other guests began browsing, laughing, sharing stories with employees who listened attentively. Harold, once one of the quietest staff members, now guided an elderly couple through a selection of anniversary rings, treating them with a reverence that was impossible to fake. Lisa, another young associate, sat with a group of widows, pouring tea and sharing gentle conversation. As the day unfolded, the boutique buzzed with life in a way it never had before. It was no longer just a place to buy luxury goods. It was a place where people felt seen, heard, valued. Near the end of the day, Dwayne stood at the center of the store and called for quiet. The chatter died down, and all eyes turned toward him. "I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today," he said. "Legacy Day isn't just about jewelry. It's about honoring the stories, the struggles, and the triumphs that brought us all here. It's about remembering that behind every face is a history worth respecting." He looked around the room, seeing faces filled with emotion, employees, guests, even passers-by who had wandered in, drawn by the unusual energy radiating from the boutique. "And it's about this," he continued, motioning to Mrs. Lynn and May, "about families, about connections that last longer than any diamond or gold chain ever could." There was a beat of silence, and then, slowly at first, the room filled with applause. It was not the polite clapping of a formal event, but the heartfelt applause of people who had been touched, who had felt something shift inside them. After the applause faded, Dwayne stepped down and mingled with the guests, listening to their stories, accepting their thanks with humility. Mrs. Lynn introduced him proudly to May, who showed off the bracelet and locket with a smile that could have lit the entire boutique. Late in the afternoon, as the event wound down, Dwayne found a quiet moment to sit with Mrs. Lynn once more. They shared a cup of tea, watching as Sophie and the others helped the last few guests with their purchases. "You've done something special here," Mrs. Lynn said, her voice thick with emotion. "You didn't just change a store, you changed hearts." Dwayne smiled softly. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said. "You reminded me why this place matters." Mrs. Lynn reached over and squeezed his hand gently. "Never forget that respect is the greatest gift you can give." "I won't," Dwayne promised. As the final guests left and the employees began tidying up, Dwayne sat for a moment longer, savoring the peace that now filled the space. Legacy Day had been a success, but it was only the beginning. He knew there would be challenges ahead, moments when old habits tried to creep back in, but he also knew that something unshakable had been planted here today, a commitment to honor, to dignity, to true service. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the polished floors, and for the first time in a long time, Johnson's Jewels truly lived up to its name. The days following the first Legacy Day at Johnson's Jewels marked a new era for the boutique. Word of what had happened spread far beyond the immediate neighborhood. Videos captured by customers during Amanda's public dismissal and Dwayne's powerful speech circulated widely on social media. News outlets picked up the story, painting Johnson's Jewels as a beacon of change in an industry too often accused of elitism and coldness. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, already beloved for his larger-than-life persona and commitment to good causes, was now being hailed as a champion of everyday dignity. While the public attention was gratifying, Dwayne remained focused on what mattered most, ensuring that the changes inside the store weren't just temporary, weren't just a response to a viral moment, but the foundation for something lasting. Sophie proved to be a natural leader. With Dwayne's encouragement, she organized regular team meetings where employees could voice their ideas and concerns openly. Training sessions on empathy, active listening, and cultural sensitivity became a mandatory part of everyone's schedule, not just a box to tick off, but a genuine commitment. Dwayne personally attended the first few sessions, sitting shoulder to shoulder with the staff, participating fully, setting the tone by example rather than decree. The sessions were sometimes uncomfortable. Employees confessed to biases they hadn't realized they held. They shared stories of times they had failed to speak up, ashamed now of their silence. But through it all, there was growth. Real, painful, beautiful growth. Mrs. Lynn became a regular visitor, often bringing May with her. She seemed to embody the spirit of what Johnson's Jewels was striving to become. Her presence reminded everyone why the change had been necessary, why it was worth fighting for every single day. Other customers who had once been turned away or looked down upon began returning, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. They found a different store waiting for them, one where they were greeted warmly regardless of their appearance, where their stories were listened to and respected. One afternoon, a man named Mr. Carter, a retired firefighter in his 70s, visited the boutique. His hands were rough from years of service, his clothes simple, but he was welcomed with the same deference as the wealthiest client. Sophie personally helped him choose a ring for his wife's upcoming birthday, a small but beautiful piece that spoke more to sentiment than extravagance. Tears welled in Mr. Carter's eyes as he completed the purchase, overwhelmed by the kindness he had been shown. Moments like that became common at Johnson's Jewels. Moments where the invisible barriers between customer and merchant dissolved, replaced by genuine human connection. Dwayne continued to visit regularly, sometimes posing for photos with excited guests, sometimes blending into the background to observe the interactions quietly. He made it a point to speak individually with the staff members, to thank them for their efforts, to encourage them when they struggled. He knew change wasn't linear. There would be setbacks, but he also knew that every conversation, every act of kindness, every small improvement was a victory. Meanwhile, Sophie approached Dwayne with a new idea. Inspired by the success of Legacy Day, she proposed a scholarship program funded by a percentage of the store's profits. The scholarships would support young people pursuing education in arts, craftsmanship, and community leadership, fields that celebrated creativity and service rather than just material wealth. Dwayne loved the idea. It aligned perfectly with the vision he had for the boutique. A place that didn't just sell luxury, but invested in the future. Plans for the scholarship were quickly set into motion. Applications would open in the coming months, and the first recipients would be honored at a special ceremony held right inside the store. It was a way of turning the pain of the past into hope for the future, of transforming injustice into opportunity. As the store grew in reputation, attracting media attention and a new wave of loyal customers, Dwayne received several offers from business executives who wanted to franchise Johnson's Jewels or invest heavily to expand the brand. But Dwayne turned them all down. Growth for the sake of growth had never been his goal. Impact mattered more. Authenticity mattered more. He knew that scaling too fast risked diluting the very heart of what they had built. One evening, as Dwayne prepared to leave after another long but fulfilling day at the store, he found Mrs. Lynn waiting for him near the entrance. May was with her, holding a small envelope in her hands. The girl approached him shyly. "Mr. Johnson," May said, her voice barely above a whisper, "we made this for you." Dwayne knelt down, accepting the envelope carefully. Inside was a simple hand-drawn card. In crayon, it showed a picture of the boutique, with smiling customers and employees, and in the center, a cartoon version of Dwayne himself, arms wide, welcoming everyone. Across the top, May had written, "Thank you for making a place where everyone belongs." Dwayne blinked rapidly, overwhelmed by emotion. He looked up at Mrs. Lynn, who smiled warmly. "You gave us more than jewelry," she said. "You gave us dignity." Dwayne rose slowly, the card held carefully in his massive hands. "No," he said, his voice thick with feeling. "You gave me a reason to be better." He tucked the card safely into his jacket pocket, silently vowing to keep it with him always, a reminder of why this fight mattered. As he stepped outside into the cool evening air, Dwayne looked back at the boutique. Its golden lights spilled onto the sidewalk, a beacon against the gathering darkness. He knew there would always be challenges ahead, always more work to do. But tonight, he felt something powerful stir within him. Hope. Hope that one small act of justice could ripple outward, touching lives he might never meet, inspiring kindness he might never witness. Hope that respect, once sown carefully and nurtured with care, could bloom into something mighty. Dwayne walked down the street, the city alive around him, the card pressed close to his heart, and he smiled. The real treasure wasn't in the glass cases or velvet boxes. The real treasure was the community they had built. And this was just the beginning. In the weeks that followed, Johnson's Jewels experienced a transformation deeper than anyone could have anticipated. What had started with a single moment of justice had evolved into a movement, reshaping not just the store, but the lives connected to it. Customers returned not because of the luxury goods, but because of the feeling they experienced inside those walls. A feeling of being valued, no matter who they were. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson made it a point to stay involved, visiting often, never allowing the energy of change to dissipate. Sophie, Harold, Lisa, and the rest of the staff continued to grow into their roles, embodying the mission of the store with authentic pride. The Legacy Day events became a tradition, expanding from once a month to once every 2 weeks due to popular demand. Elderly visitors, once hesitant to cross the boutique's polished threshold, now walked in with heads held high, often accompanied by children and grandchildren who wanted to witness the place that treated their loved ones with such rare dignity. Newspapers ran features about the boutique, highlighting it as a shining example of business done right. A national news outlet picked up the story, broadcasting interviews with Sophie, Harold, and even Mrs. Lynn, who, with May by her side, told the story of her first painful encounter and the extraordinary kindness that followed. But the true change could be seen not in headlines but in everyday moments, like the way Harold would pull out chairs for older customers without thinking about it, or how Lisa learned sign language basics to better assist a regular customer who was hearing impaired. It was seen in the genuine laughter that now echoed between the glass cases, in the moments when customers and employees connected not as buyer and seller, but as human beings. The scholarship fund launched successfully, and applications poured in from all over the city. Dwayne personally read many of the letters, moved by the stories of resilience, hope, and ambition. When the first recipients were announced, the boutique hosted a small, heartfelt ceremony. Among the winners was May, nominated not just for her academic promise, but for her spirit of kindness. She stood proudly on the stage set up inside the boutique, her locket glinting under the lights, as Dwayne handed her a scholarship certificate with a proud smile. "You're going to do great things," he said as he knelt to her level. May beamed, her arms clutching the certificate as if it were a key to a new future. Mrs. Lynn watched from the audience, tears streaming down her cheeks, her heart full beyond words. Not all was perfect. There were still occasional customers who came expecting the cold elitism they associated with luxury boutiques, who were confused or even skeptical of the new approach. Some competitors tried to capitalize on the store's fame by imitating their events without genuine intent. But Dwayne had anticipated this. He knew that real change wasn't about trends, it was about consistency, authenticity. Every time a customer left Johnson's Jewels feeling respected and valued, that was a win no imitation could erase. One evening, as the boutique closed its doors after a particularly lively Legacy Day, Dwayne gathered the staff together. They sat in a circle near the main display case, the lights dimmed to a soft glow around them. Dwayne looked around at the faces illuminated in the golden light. Faces that had once been uncertain, fearful, burdened. Now they were filled with pride, purpose, and something more profound. Hope. "I want you all to know something," Dwayne began, his voice low and steady. "This store, it's not about me. It's about all of you, about the choice you made to be better, to do better." He paused, letting his words settle. "Legacy isn't what we leave behind when we're gone," he said. "It's what we build while we're still here. It's every hand we lift, every heart we respect, every life we touch." Sophie, sitting closest to him, nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You turned this place around," Dwayne continued, "not because you had to, but because you chose to. That's what makes it real." A heavy, meaningful silence followed. Then Harold cleared his throat, his voice gruff but sincere. "You gave us a chance to be part of something bigger than ourselves," he said. "That's a rare thing." One by one, others spoke up, sharing their gratitude, their renewed sense of purpose. They spoke of the pride they felt when customers thanked them, when strangers wrote letters praising the store. They spoke of the moments that had changed them, made them see their work and themselves differently. As the night wore on, laughter and stories filled the space, weaving an invisible tapestry of connection between them. It was no longer just a team. It was a family. Finally, Mrs. Lynn, who had stayed after the event to help clean up, approached the group. She stood at the edge of their circle, a small smile on her face. "You don't just sell jewelry anymore," she said. "You sell kindness. You sell hope." The group fell silent, touched by the truth of her words. Dwayne rose and walked over to her, offering a deep, respectful bow. "Thank you," he said simply. Mrs. Lynn chuckled softly. "No, thank you." Later that night, as Dwayne locked the doors and stood for a moment looking at the boutique bathed in moonlight, he felt a deep, unshakable peace settle over him. He thought about all the moments that had led to this one, the anger he had felt seeing injustice, the decision to act rather than ignore, the painful conversations, the hard-earned trust. He realized then that true power wasn't in fame or wealth or muscles. True power was in standing up when it mattered most, in choosing kindness when it was hardest, in building something beautiful not for recognition, but because it was right. He turned away from the boutique, the soft click of the lock echoing behind him, and walked into the night with a heart full of quiet, steadfast joy. The real jewelry at Johnson's Jewels wasn't behind glass anymore. It was in the people. It was in the legacy they were building together, and it was shining brighter than any diamond. Several months later, Johnson's Jewels stood not just as a jewelry boutique, but as a symbol of transformation. The sun poured through the tall windows one crisp autumn morning, illuminating the store with a natural golden glow. The once intimidating marble floors now felt welcoming, the soft music playing overhead adding to the warmth rather than to the coldness of luxury. Dwayne, the Rock. Johnson entered the boutique quietly, unnoticed at first as customers and employees chatted, laughed, and moved easily through the space. He watched with a quiet pride as Harold helped an elderly man pick out a necklace for his daughter, as Lisa knelt down to speak eye to eye with a little boy choosing a gift for his mother, and as Sophie supervised everything with a light touch, her leadership now effortless and respected. Legacy Day had become more than just an event. It had inspired a cultural shift in the entire neighborhood. Other businesses had started hosting their own appreciation days, donating to the scholarship fund, and investing more in serving their communities with respect and dignity. What had once been just a reaction to injustice had blossomed into a movement rooted in kindness and perseverance. Dwayne moved further into the boutique, greeting customers and staff with nods and handshakes. He found Mrs. Lynn sitting by the tea station, a small plate of cookies in front of her. She smiled warmly when she saw him and gestured for him to sit. May was there too, now taller, her posture straighter, her eyes brighter with the confidence that only comes from being truly supported and seen. As Dwayne settled into the seat beside Mrs. Lynn, he took a deep breath, soaking in the atmosphere. The store didn't just look different. It felt different. It breathed differently. It lived differently. Mrs. Lynn poured him a cup of tea, her hands steady. "You've built something beautiful here," she said. Dwayne smiled modestly. "I didn't do it alone." She chuckled. "Maybe not, but you lit the fire." As they sipped tea, Sophie approached, a small leather-bound book in her hands. She handed it to Dwayne, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "We thought you should have this," she said. Dwayne opened the book and found it filled with handwritten notes from customers, employees, and scholarship recipients. Notes of gratitude, stories of how the store had touched their lives, how a single act of kindness had rippled outward in ways they could never have imagined. Some letters were simple thank yous. Others were detailed stories of how a moment in Johnson's Jewels had changed the course of someone's day or even their life. Dwayne turned the pages slowly, feeling the weight of each word. Here was the true measure of success, not in quarterly profits or market expansions, but in these human connections, these real moments of impact. As he closed the book, he found May standing in front of him, her hands clasped behind her back, a mischievous smile on her face. "Mr. Johnson," she said with mock formality, "we have one more surprise." He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Mrs. A. Lynn stood up and pulled something from her purse, a small, carefully wrapped box. She handed it to Dwayne, who looked at her with surprise. "You didn't have to," he began. "Just open it," she said, smiling. Dwayne carefully unwrapped the box, revealing a simple but elegant bracelet made of braided leather and a single silver charm engraved with the words, "You believed." For a moment, Dwayne couldn't speak. He turned the bracelet over in his hands, feeling the texture, the weight, the meaning. "You believed," Mrs. Lynn repeated softly, "even when others doubted, even when it was hard. You believed in us, in kindness, in change." Dwayne swallowed hard against the lump rising in his throat. He slipped the bracelet onto his wrist, the fit perfect, the message even more so. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'll wear it with pride." The employees, sensing the special moment, gathered around, forming a loose circle. Customers, too, paused in their shopping to watch, their faces open and smiling. Dwayne looked around at them all and felt something profound settle deep in his chest. It wasn't pride, exactly. It was something quieter, something steadier. It was fulfillment. He stood, looking at the people who had made this possible, who had taken the risk to change, to grow, to build something better. "I want to say something," he said, his voice carrying through the boutique. The room fell into a respectful hush. "When I first walked into this store undercover, I was angry," he said honestly. "Angry at what I saw, angry at the way people were treated." He looked at Mrs. Lynn, then at May, then at Sophie and Harold and the others. "But that anger," he continued, "turned into something else. It turned into action, and action turned into change. Not because of me, because of all of you." He paused, letting the silence embrace his words. "We proved that respect isn't a luxury. It's a right. We proved that real change starts with one person standing up and saying, 'This isn't right.' And then another person joins, and another, until it's not just one voice, it's a chorus." Soft applause broke out, growing louder until the whole boutique rang with it. Dwayne smiled, feeling the bracelet on his wrist, feeling the connection to everyone in that room. He raised his hand for quiet once more. "Remember this," he said. "We didn't just fix a store, we built a family. And as long as we keep believing in each other, this family will only grow stronger." The crowd erupted into cheers this time, genuine and joyful. Mrs. Lynn hugged May close, tears of happiness glistening in her eyes. Sophie wiped her cheeks, laughing through her tears. Harold clapped Dwayne on the back, grinning ear to ear, and Dwayne stood among them all, not as a celebrity, not as a businessman, but as a man who had chosen to believe that kindness could change the world. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm, indifferent and busy. But inside Johnson's Jewels, something rare and precious shone brighter than any diamond. The enduring light of respect, the priceless beauty of hope.